welcome you once again to this Uganda Diaspora Show. My name is Lynn Komugisha. I'm glad to have you once again. I see we have Honorable Mulongo-Simon, we have Francis Kamuhanda, and hopefully would be Honorable Brian Kwesiga, as well as Miriam. I'm glad to have you, ladies and gentlemen, to Uganda Diaspora Show. Today we will be looking at the issues at hand, the current affairs, what's happening around us as Ugandans in diaspora, but also what is happening back home. If I could bring you up to speed, we have heads of state and government in a meeting in Dar es Salaam. We have the ESC and SADC joint emergency meeting on, of course, DRC and what's happening in Eastern Congo. The talking issues, security of Eastern Congo, alongside other issues, but most importantly, that. And we know what's happening in Congo is not very good. Of course, it spills over, and we're going to also dissect that shortly. But we also want to look at what's happening to Ugandan migrants in the US. There's African migrants, if I could say. What's the status? What does it look like? But there's also an interesting one that we're going to look at that caught everybody by surprise, and everyone was very happy about the outcome, and that is the court-martial ruling by the Supreme Court on the court-martial and how that is taking effect. So I welcome you once again, and I say let's begin. I want to start with Brian. Brian, do you have any information on what's happening with the status of African or Ugandan migrants, but before that, unfortunately, we have an outbreak of the Ebola Sudan strain in Uganda. Ministry of Health says it is not alarming. They're working on it, and as I speak, they've started clinical trial to combat Sudan strain of Ebola virus that is going on. But not to worry you, it is under control and everything is in order. So, Brian, what's the status? What is happening with this immigration? Most Ugandans keep asking in corridors, have people been sent back home? What is it like? Give us a picture if you have any.
Thank you so much, Lynn, for welcoming me and all the fellow panelists. It's good to be here with you. I think there's a general sense of panic, not just I think in the US, but I think around the world. Get phone calls from relatives you've not heard from in a while. Are you guys okay? When are you all of you guys coming back? Has Trump sent all of you guys back? Have you hired lawyers? So I find myself in the envious position of actually having to defend Trump, and I'm like, no, 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 most of what you're hearing is actually fake news. It's not what's on the ground and that kind of stuff. But obviously, his actions and his rhetoric has not helped. Obviously, why some of us were never supported him is exactly what is happening. Is exactly what we feared. I believe I believe he's a racist. I believe he's a warmonger. I think he's a white supremacist, and just the action he took a few hours back, saying he's going to accelerate migration to the U.S. for South Africans of European descent, just adds to the fear that all of us had about him as a leader. That he's playing the populist card for his own political views. Having obviously people like Elon Musk in his orbit has not helped. There's Elon Musk, there's Peter Thiel, and I think there's David Sachs, all billionaires, all supporting Trump, all with ties to South Africa. So I think the world generally is in that state of panic and there's a lot of information and disinformation going on from different camps. But I think if we have to go by what happened during his first time in office, it's going to be a very chaotic 4 years. And it just seems like this time around it's even going to be worse because he's more prepared. and it seems like Democrats have this time around been beaten into submission. There's no the so-called resistance and all that. It's like last time around they could say, how could this happen? Russia helped him. Russia interfered with the election, but this time it's like they have accepted that that he was chosen by the majority of Americans, and I think that's causing a lot of introspection on the parts of Democrats. So like, okay, what next? How do we reconnect with uh, with the rest of America for them to deliver on their agenda? So I think that's what's happening. Obviously, I think there's been both in rhetoric and indeed there's been a little bit more increased immigration enforcement, but not to the level that people back home are scared of and are fearing. You can't deport every illegal immigrant in the US. They are you don't have enough prisons to hold them. You don't have enough courts and judges to hear the cases. You don't have enough resources to deport all of them. Sure, it's going to be a little bit heightened, and the fear may scare some people from maybe entering the US legally to begin with. But the
Mm.
US is a country of immigrants, both legal and illegal. So yeah.
Mm. Right. I like that you paint that picture for us because everywhere you turn, people are asking, aha, are people safe? Are people safe? Are they coming back in a minute? Have they been deported? But we understand, of course, as a directive, it also comes with the challenges of funding and, deportation centers and all those things. It's not something that is going to happen by a click of a finger. So that's quite comforting. I would want to hear from Miriam and, of course, Francis on what they think about this whole thing. And from their circles, I'll begin with you, Miriam, from your circles, the deportation and the immigration situation on ground that side and how the perceptions back home.
Good afternoon, good morning to our viewers and fellow panelists. And like Brian said, a lot of the immigration talk is more about the intimidation. And I think maybe that's how the government in power wants it. That's how Trump government wants it. It's more like scaremongering. Bottom line is that the law will take its course, so it can't just happen like you are bundling people on trucks and throwing them out of in planes and throwing them out of the country like Idi Amin did in Uganda. So it's just gonna take time, and they follow the law. So the few people that will be affected will certainly be those who are like criminal records. And I mean, if it's an illegal entry, I saw somewhere they were saying like any illegal entries in the last 2 years, like they so recent. So those who have been around for some time and you have no criminal record may not be affected in the immediate. But all said and done, it's that fear. People can't live in a state of fear. And then there is that the laws where he said he can follow people. Recently, I think it's last evening, I saw somewhere they said they can follow kids at school. They're gonna track parents when they are coming for treatments in hospitals, because that's where you talk about your information. Like that's when they ask you about and your legal status comes out, because you register everything. They ask about your social, your address and all that. So people fear that he might track the illegal immigrants at those points, and then that would so the backlash is that the effect is that now parents who are illegal migrants, even if your children are citizens, because children born in USA have birthright, citizenship by birthright, so they are citizens by birth. So you find that even parents fear to take their kids to hospitals, to schools, because you fear, you don't know when someone is watching or looking for you. And then there are states where I think I read Colorado somewhere, where they are knocking on doors, like neighbors report their neighbors if they suspect you are an illegal immigrant, and they are knocking on your door, and it's never comfortable. for police or any security officers to knock on someone's door, especially here in America, where you know that a knock can even come with gunshots and all sorts of stuff. And then if you have families, people are intimidated, or even if they come knocking, most of the time you find that it's all your family is affected. It could be you, it could be the wife, the kids. So who is being deported and who is not being deported? Then there is that effect. Like if the children are American citizens and the parents are illegal, you deport the parents. What happens to the kids? And nobody's pausing around to think about that. Where do you abandon them? Do you also deport them? And then what about like pregnant mothers? You are illegal, but you have like an emergency health condition which should be attended to in immediate, and then you're affected because you fear to step out of the way. The good thing is that some states have come up, even my state, Ohio, which is a red state and should really be like pro-Trump. They are coming up to put up some safeguards to protect immigrants, and that's a good thing. They are stopping arrests in churches, schools, and all that stuff. And I think they're gonna put like some safe corridors where people can access hospital care and all that stuff. And we hope that comes into effect. But like Brian said, there is like lethargy, like there is that people have like surrendered to the oppression, which wasn't the case last time when during the Trump presidency, his first tenure. In the first tenure, I would see protests, women protesting, people protesting for the LGBTI. We see people protesting for against arrest of illegal migrants and all that. But now it's like people have given up. Even racist comments from government officials, they are thrown here and there, and then you don't see people fighting back, and maybe that's some cause for worry.
Right. Thank you, Miriam. Francis, your take on this?
Oh, thank you, Lynn, and fellow panelists, and I think coming and discussing important issues here. Like other Brian and Miriam have said, yes, of course, it casts anxiety, and it makes people who are immigrants live in fear and uncertainty. But did we see this coming? Of course, yes, because right away from when Trump was campaigning in 2016 and up to now, his ideology of white supremacy has always been top on agenda. Then this time he was emphasizing more on immigration and mass deportation. I think now he's proving like a point. Like, yes, Brian has said it is quite expensive indeed. But at first, like if you see how he deported people from India and other countries, is like to create more fear. At first, do it, and then more fear begins running through whoever is an immigrant and stuff like that. And of course, you see he's like hyper that he's, and everybody saw how he's cutting foreign aid and so on. But the good that it is not affecting only people who are, but also Republicans in general. For example, these illegal migrants were working in the farms, and farms are almost crumbling. Some items, the prices are going high. Like even the health and welfare sector, it is immigrants who are in the health sector, who are in the welfare sector, and so on. So at least it of such an authority kind of actions for because all these executive orders are more or less dictatorial tendencies, but because these are democratic countries, they cover them as executive orders. But it is not also good. I also think that where Trump thought that it was an easy goal, like maybe in the past, where he attacked like more of geopolitics without realizing that trends have changed. They cannot bulldoze other countries forever, because I have seen reactions from other countries which also seem indirectly in one way or another affecting the biggest population in America. And then people are reacting. Yes, they are. Yesterday I was driving through Baltimore and I was seeing people across the bridge holding press cards and complaining, which was a good thing. Then I have also seen farmers rising, because program like the USDA and like the humanitarian food assistance, these are programs basically that help American farmers, because they buy from them that food that is donated for them to get income. Once they are stopped, then the farmer will also suffer. So I see that yes, there will be stop on this, but it will be much more gradual, and we hope that the biggest population will also realize that it was in one way or another a mistake putting this man and giving him power, and he's wielding it like no man's business, because he's even attacking. I think he's overthrowing their constitution, because some of the things that were done by the Congress, and he's undoing them, and yet it is not the responsibility of the president here. Thank you.
Right. Thank you very much, Francis. Honorable Simon, as an international relations expert and your level of experience, I would want you to weigh in on what's happening in regards to this immigration issue in the U.S. against Africans and other immigrants.
Well, thank you, Lynn, and a good day, colleagues. For us, this is late afternoon. It's coming to evening. Well, I think Trump's policies have very serious consequences, both to America itself and also to other countries that relate with America. Because people who go there for opportunities, America has been known as a land of opportunities, because of the policies they had, open, receptive policies, where people go there and exploit the abundant opportunities to not only empower themselves, support people back home, but also support the American cause, because the labor that contribute to the economic well-being of America stems from also from these people, because I can tell you that these deportations and mass deportations will lead to a loss of between 4.2 to 6.8% of the annual US GDP, which can be equated to about 1.1 trillion US dollars to 1.7 trillion US dollars. And this is a serious issue, because areas where it's blue collar jobs that have been done by these people will be left unattended to, and if there are any replacements, will be very expensive replacements. So I don't know whether Trump is serious with his economic models that he's trying to use to assess whether this is likely to impact negatively, and what measures he has to put in place to ensure that it doesn't occur to his economy or not. Because people don't just go to America to stay on the beaches. They go to America to work. So it is very surprising. And the Immigration and Customs Enforcement, I'm told, have arrested over 11,000 individuals, some of whom include those who had previously been deported. And they're now using a number of federal prisons, including Guantanamo Bay, where they're trying to expand it and its capacity to ensure that it can accommodate to as much as the 30,000 what they call high-risk individuals, This is really serious, and you can see it is not just deportation alone, it is actually incriminating and incarcerating some members. So I fear for it. And colleagues have already mentioned about the risk of separating families, disrupting communities, because most of these so-called undocumented immigrants reside in mixed status households. See, so the removal would definitely significantly reduce household incomes and impose substantial financial burden on social services, because then they must rely on the state services. So, and not to mention psychological impact, where the US born children of deported parents is going to be very profound. So, so really, I see a lot of serious consequences on this. But just to say some few other remarks. One is, I think our countries should be able to engage the U.S. authorities. I know these such orders are very hard to negotiate, but to make sure that our people, particularly say if you're Ugandans, Ugandan can work with the ESC to make sure they look at it broadly from the larger perspective of East African community, or even including African Union, to engage with the administration of Trump to make sure that there is humane treatment, and where people are being incriminated, that there is a legal due process that is in place to do that, and also to develop policies and programs for reintegrating these returnees. Because when these returnees come back, they need to be reintegrated. It's a serious issue. They cannot, the way they went is not the way they're being brought back. And since they've been supporting us with quite good amount of money, forex, directly inflow of forex, we should not look aside when they're suffering and being returned. Our government should take responsibility and make sure that they go into bilateral engagements and negotiate some repatriation agreements to ensure that there is humane and proper due processes to be done. The other one will be to Uganda and other African countries should think of strengthening consular services at our embassies and ensure that they provide legal support, documentation, and guidance to Ugandans facing deportation or seeking to regularize their immigration status if it is possible. And it's very important that our missions also track the cases of detained Ugandans, if any. I don't know if we have an idea whether people being detained include Ugandans and how many, which names, and so on. So there's some kind of support to them as much as possible. Now, back home, we need to think of developing reintegration programs where there is need for skill training, where there is a possibility of job placement. Don't tell me that the unemployment is very high, but it is worse for somebody who just returns the way these people are being returned. Definitely there is need, because it can have its own consequences if we don't find a way of working out some placement of sorts. And some of these people have earned a lot of skills in the US. They have earned a lot of experience that we can exploit for purposes of our own local economies and other potentials. We could also work out with the public-private partnership arrangements with the Uganda manufacturers, with the industrialists in this country, the private sector organizations, to see, including even CSOs and so on, where these people can find some soft landing of sorts. So I think, and also to strengthen Uganda's diaspora policy. We should strengthen it, because these diaspora desks that exist in the State House, and I don't know whether there's a desk in the Foreign Affairs, and if it is there, we should have a proper diaspora policy which can enhance our diaspora engagement, to have a strategy to encourage legal migration pathways, issues of investment, and remittances that are clearly articulated, so that people are not just chased away like thieves, chicken thieves in the village, and then they come here and they do hard landing. It's not good. So my issue is, and also finally, Lynn and colleagues, it is time for us to really address root causes of migration in a more serious way, in a more focused way. Why should many Ghanaians migrate? Maybe due to economic hardship. So the issues of policies to promote job creation, entrepreneurship, and education that can reduce the need for risky migration. This is important, and we need to do that. And of course, these programs, which are in a piecemeal, like youth empowerment programs and so on, that those which are in place, but this is the time to really act them up. Just like we have the parish development model that managed to capture a huge chunk of money in quite a number of billions, I think it is time to really focus on the youths in terms of entrepreneurship, in terms of skills development, and providing alternative survival mechanisms to be able to mitigate against irregular migration. So those could be some of my ideas. You called me an expert. I'm not sure whether I am, but I've tried to speak to mimic one so that I look like I'm fairly educated, even if I'm really not necessarily an expert in some of these things. Thank you, Lynn.
Thank you for that, Honorable Simon. But just before you go off, the question here that comes to my mind is that in the previous time, just before Trump, we saw that the U.S. was trying to rebuild U.S.-Africa relations, and with all this going down, we know that the AGOA is scheduled to expire. We are seeing that South Africa is going to host the Group of 20 this year. It will be a very defining year for Africa as we look forward to these new policies under Trump. But then, where does that leave the U.S.-Africa relations?
First of all, my brother Brian was reminding us how his support was in the right place. I have been a supporter of the Democrats for all my time, or can I call it sympathizer? But amidst all this, to say the truth, I have no sympathy for the Democrats because of their extensive liberties, some of which lead to very harmful practices. And I cannot go back to that. Yes, normally there are always pros and cons in every quarter. Trump has his own pros and he has his own also cons. Yes. So let's deal with the Trump's negatives as such, but I think he has his own strength, including awakening us to think twice about ourselves, not to be too much dependent on the West, because the Westerners have been extremely harmful to Africa, right ever since the times of slave trade. And you see how they deported Africans to very hostile locations within America. They really relocated them to various areas which were very hostile, and then also deporting them to some islands that are very hostile. Look at these places like, where is this place where the Kenyans are? Well, that was once French a colony, very, very hostile places. And as if that's not enough, the discrimination against Africa and deliberate policies to undermine Africa, they cannot even allow us to develop. When they see you trying to emerge with some degree of autonomy, they will come after you. They will instigate coups. They'll do assassinations. CIA projects and programs in Africa is so immense. Even when you see DRC, as we shall come to it, much of it has to do with those Western countries. So, yes, Trump, I think, is playing it open, and there are lessons for us to pick. But back to your question. Definitely, these deportations and cutting of the aid and all this somehow introduces complexities into our relations with the U.S. Um, I remember in the past, if you look at the numbers, our migration to U.S. particularly was very modest indeed.
Yeah.
And mainly people used to go through legal channels and achieving notable economic success. But in the recent times, a number of Africans who went to America, uh, uh, have had issues, as you can see, and that means that Africa must begin reviewing its policies in a manner, because we should not leave this to just remain basically for the people to struggle by themselves, but they should be guided. We should have guided. And if you remember those ones who are going to Europe, who are dying on the high seas of the Mediterranean, and all that. I
Yeah.
think it is time that our individual countries, collectively as regional blocks, but also as AU, we need to apt our act in terms of focusing on how we can come up with the policies, which will be like negotiated movements and so on and so forth.
Mm.
Now, I also think that um, we need to look at multipolarity, because the US boasting as the sole superpower makes them even become very arrogant as they are doing. And when it comes to an arrogant leader, recently President Kagame was was quoted saying that when he looks at some leaders, he can tell that this one's a leader or this one is an idiot. And when an idiot becomes a leader, then things become very bad. So if the Americans are arrogant because they're superpowers, and when they get an arrogant president, it becomes worse. So we should think of um, uh, I hope they let people to join, because I can see some signals, some members want to come in. Yes. So to me, I think that we need to review issues of multipolarity. We should be able to diversify our attention to other global powers and enhance our relationship with them in terms of trade and investment. And as such, it enabled us to look at many opportunities other than focusing, say, to America alone. So to me, definitely, the issue of the emerging of the new arrangements under BRICS,
Mm.
the issue of the Middle East. If we can also sanitize the Middle East, not to leave people on their own, and the issue of having negotiated migration. To me, those kind of approaches, Madam Lynn, could be part of the pathways that we can grow and enhance as developing countries. Back to you.
All right. Right. Thank you very much, Honorable. I come back to you, Brian, as we wind up on this conversation on this Trump policy and immigration. Um, of course, still related to the US Africa relations, we're seeing a lot happening. We saw that not so long ago, the conversations were centering around trade and investment. But now, if all this is happening, African leaders ought maybe to prepare themselves to see the relations between the US and Africa guided by immigration issues instead of trade and investment. What do you think, Brian?
Well, I don't think Africa has much negotiating power with the US when it comes to immigration. There's nothing. If they want qualified immigrants, I think there are better countries which are better positioned to supply immigration. The Indias of the world and the other Western European countries, or as Trump is doing, trying to entice the European population, the European population of descent, the South African citizens. Um, I think there's room for Africa to negotiate with Trump in terms of maybe trade, business, but I'm skeptic because Trump is not um someone who has previously expressed interest in Africa. The only times, both during his first term and second term, that he has come close to mentioning Africa was one referring them as shithole countries, and now treating about South Africa over something I believe he does not understand very well. I don't find him to be an especially intellectually curious person. I don't know how much of Africa's history he knows or is interested in knowing. I think he's the first president since almost 50 years to leave office without visiting Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. So I think obviously we have to do our part, but it's also this is an opportunity for Africa to try to expand its relationships beyond the US, beyond Western Europe. Honorable Simon mentioned about BRICS, so I think maybe Eastern Europe has some opportunities for us. Southern America, Asia, obviously. So I'll leave the work of what Uganda should do to develop trade to the people who are paid to do that, our diplomats. But I think us as citizens as well, we need to obviously look into it. But I'm not very optimistic when it comes to Trump, just because I think his natural disposition is anti-African.
Right. Okay. Quickly between Francis, I begin with you, and then I'll end with Miriam on this same conversation. Francis, we see that previously Trump, of course, has always been his outlook. His look at Africa was more transactional approach in a bit, but not necessarily a fancy way, if I could put it that way. Do you see that our relations perhaps are going to be sour as we move forward with the US?
I think bottom line, Lynn, is I will agree with Simon because where chance prevails, it favors a prepared mind. Simon brought an important point that how our countries prepared, how can we turn a misfortune into a fortune? And that is something very, very important, because if these other countries or the West looks at us in a transactional way, exploitational way generally, to exploit, after exploiting us, and then maybe now it's when they think of dumping us. So what do we do, or how our countries prepared to say, okay, enough is enough? Like, how do we also exploit? There are other countries that have been, like, in one war or another, recalling back their skilled manpower to almost duplicate these other services that they see outside. And you find people are moving on properly, which I think is still lacking in some of our countries, which would be a starting point. Like, for example, I will give you an example. On a day when foreign aid was cut, US aid in particular, that was pouring millions of money into the economy of Uganda in as far as helping, I think, the HIV programs and so on. Almost shortly, the members of parliament are passing a supplementary budget to buy cars, meaning they completely don't know what is taking place. And yet this would be an opportunity to say, okay, let's take a pause. Let's now reprioritize, because this is a new play that has come in. Can the cars that we have still move for maybe a year or so, and then we see how do we bridge this gap and emerges that has come in? But you are seeing how they were just acting in a more reckless way. You talked about AGOA. When this opportunity came, which we know the West and the way how they play with us may not last for long, how are we going to maximize it? But you see, it was more or less of a family issue and so on. I think that's where we miss on a point, not having the priorities of our country first, but people try to trade their own personal and selfish interests, and that cuts across Africa. I'm happy. I hope they will come up with a more local solution. When I had the East African Community and SADC meeting to discuss the Congo question, but we shall come to that. So I like these opportunities. But now, Simon talked about our diplomatic missions coming in and so on. For sure, those ones are doing a terrible job, Simon. They are not doing us any good. That's why you see those who were in, I think, in the Arab Emirates or wherever, they turned the embassy into a casino. So these are the people that we have. So not until we have career diplomats to know what are the interests, and they never engage us who are in the diaspora in a more positive way, like, guys, what do you see, and so on and so forth. That's why you find when we come up with the UNAA convention, then it's what they jump on and so on. But the embassy itself would be able to organize such, call people like Brian and the rest of us, and then say, guys, what, or even can we come to the embassy and have a debate? Brian is there defending the NRM, and I'm also here saying, no, this should be the alternative policies and so on. And at the end of the day, we have a way forward. And I think these bring positive things when we engage. By the way, Lynn, when you hosted here the panel from the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Passport Desk, for sure, that is I have to thank them, because since then, everything was moving very fast. I was surprised when I was renewing my passport. Within 2 weeks, I'm in the diaspora, I had got it. So I have to thank that desk. And these are some of the things that we did. But it is important that even we, like, for example, what is Ugandan policy in as far as what Trump is doing, or any other Western country, than exploitation? You see, like recently, what was taking place in what Chinese were doing is it in Rwanda and so on. And they go, no, we gave them 3 acres, but now they have expanded. So such a things we have to strengthen, and also see how we refocus ourselves amid these policies. As they make policies, let's also streamline ours and see how we can move forward. Thank you.
Right. Thank you, Francis. Miriam, over to you. Same issue at hand. And if you notice that our relations have not been really fancy or wonderful, if I could say, previously. Right now, I feel like we are headed even for worse times, as the U.S. immigration policy looks to be very stringent, especially in African countries, because over years we are seeing that immigrants to the U.S. the number has shot up, and I'm seeing that this policy seems to be the catalyst for how we relate with the U.S.
I want to add on what my fellow panelists had said, but before I do that, I want to ask Simon. Simon, I think you are contradicting yourself. You say you didn't fancy the democratic leadership that was in power before Trump because of their liberal views. Yeah, granted. But then the problem is that you are hoping for so much from Trump government, which has no interest in Africa whatsoever. I don't think they're even interested. I think for them, the map could as well be pulled down from the wall and be kept somewhere they don't want even to know. And like Brian said, they are pro-white, they are racist outwardly, and they don't hide it. They don't have nothing to do with other minor races or whatever they call. I don't know what they call the rest of other people except the white people. So they are interested in their own, and it's make America white again, and they can't hide it. It's not a secret. And if you really follow up on their agenda, it's nothing to do with Africa. It's not like even a government where you can sit and negotiate. The Democrats, they gave us these trade deals, and they were opening some doors with the U.S. African Investment Fund and all the AGOA. They are somehow subsidizing Harris and giving grants here and there, supporting education and all that. But this Trump government has no interest whatsoever about not only Africa, but other people in poor countries. You can call it the third world if you wish, except where they really, really have like big interests. Like I don't even know which country to quote where they have interest because they haven't shown any. Like you see, even in Arab countries, they are after their own. They are talking about Israel eliminating Gaza, and that means genocide. By the way, there is no way you're gonna remove the Arabs from that Gaza Strip without killing them, and that's what the Israel government has been doing. Like they really don't care at all, and we should call a spade its real name. And when it comes to Africa, my panelists have mentioned about organized migration. I think the only corridor we can have here is that most of these Western countries have open economies. Like you can, if you fail to deal with the central governments, you can deal with the private sector. So we can, if we have skilled labor, for instance, we can work with some labor agencies which can do organized migration for workers from African countries to the West. That way, you really minimize the dangers that comes with illegal migration, the people, dying trying to cross the Mediterranean Sea and all that. It's not only about USA, but even like what is happening in the Middle East. I think Africans are desperate, especially the young people. They are desperate for sustenance, for economic sustenance. They have no jobs. They don't see any future in their home countries, and they try to really look for it everywhere. So we can't blame anybody for trying to survive by migrating. We can't stop them if we don't have alternative measures on ground. So as we talk about skilled labor and how we can export that, we should also think about how we can energize our economy so that they are productive enough to accommodate our young people so that they don't have to risk all these challenges trying to look for a living somewhere else. And on the part of the Ugandan immigrants who are facing deportation from the USA. I don't know if Brian has something to say. Is UNAA, the Uganda North American Convention Association, do they have any support anywhere? Is there anybody trying to provide support? Simon talked about resettling them in Uganda, but how about supporting them here? Because like we discussed earlier, some of them are going to be leaving behind their children. Some of them are going to be separated from their loved ones, and they would leave property behind. All those things. Even if you are deported, how do you transit from one country to the other? Because this is not a planned movement. So I don't know if anybody really has any information towards that. If not, I call upon the Ugandan government to think about that.
Apologies. Thank you. I was saying, I don't know if Brian wants to react to that, but we could quickly move to what's happening in the Congo.
Exactly sure if I have the right answer, but I know they hosted a migration seminar. I believe a couple of days ago, the UNAA secretary hosted a Zoom call where they had some immigration lawyers. So they did address exactly of what happens if someone is taken, but they're addressing more like if someone finds themselves in a situation where maybe they're about to be deported or they're about to be detained, what legal resources are available. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Now, on to the most interesting and very disturbing stories coming in from Eastern DR Congo and what has happened and what is continuing to happen. We see that there's been an emergency meeting called by the East African Community and SADC heads of state and government, a meeting in Dar es Salaam today to talk about what's happening in Congo. And in her opening remarks, the Tanzanian president said she issued a strong call to action, warning that history will judge Africa harshly if regional leaders fail to take decisive measures to restore peace and security in DR Congo. And I want to begin with you, Simon, on this issue and say that you see, countries are divided. The East African countries, first of all, are pointing fingers at each other for who is backing who and who is doing what. And the question of Eastern DRC insurgency has been here for a long time. When it escalates and de-escalates, and here we are once again. What is being done wrong or what is being done right? I don't even know if that exists. So, if you could paint a picture for us, Honorable Simon, what actually is the major problem, because we see countries pointing fingers over the M23, over who is doing what. President Felix Tshisekedi is in the spotlight. Uganda, Rwanda, who is who? What is happening?
Yes. Well, as we speak, and as you rightly said, the joint EAC and SADC summits are underway for 2 days, started yesterday, and are continuing today. I'm sure they must be through. I have not checked. But the issue is that DRC has had very many challenges with the eastern DRC, particularly South and North Kivu. These two regions, provinces, call them what it is. We have people who are Rwandaphone Congolese. These Rwandaphone Congolese, remember, are part of were part of the Rwanda Kingdom, and Rwanda Kingdom spread into Uganda, the current Ndorwa area, the current part of the Kisoro area, including those parts of Rushuru, going southwards towards Bukavu. These were part of the Rwanda Kingdom. But when they separated the two countries, the colonialists, some Rwandans found themselves on the other side. And ever since, they've had issues with the locals. Actually, even during the independence, when they said that all people who were found to be living in DRC became Congolese or Zairois, the issue of the Tutsis still had some discrimination. And for some time, local politics pitted against the Rwandaphone Congolese. Even the laws which were done in 1972 that would ensure the nationalities are clearly defined and so on, there are those who are objecting to the Rwandaphone Congolese to be counted part of Congo. So these people at some stage got themselves denationalized. But of course, the challenge was triggered by the groups that were running away from Rwanda during the genocide, who went in and continued with their cause of killing Tutsis. And that's how the Tutsis, particularly in Congo, started forming some fighting groups. And these groups have gone on and on until when, after Bosco Ntaganda's CNDP and all this, they formed now the M23 because of the agreement that was done in March 23rd, 2009, and there was that peace deal between the group of CNDP and the DRC government. Now, it will be recalled that because of these challenges of survival in DRC, some of the DRC Tutsis and others joined RPF and started the war that led to the victory of RPF. So we have Congolese, Rwandaphone Congolese, who joined RPF and became part of the RPF, and with the hope that you'd also go back and fight back the injustices. Yes, some of the Rwandaphone Congolese are in good positions as we speak now. But then the issue of discrimination continues. Even at a local level, there have been cases of genocide against them. Even after 1994 to 2000, 2004 up to 2006, 7 there, there were a lot of massacres, mass atrocities against them. So these people have been excluded. These people feel they have not been made part and parcel of the Congo governance system. And moreover, they sit and struggle in areas that is very rich in minerals. And many companies, international corporations, which are concession in Kinshasa, come and exploit that area for their own benefit. And also non-entities that are not clearly known. They fly in directly and they do the exploitation. So this is just the grievances that have been lingering on for a while. But I can tell you that whereas there are also the push-up of exploitation by countries like Rwanda who have benefited a lot from it, making them perhaps the one of the highest exporters of, say, coltan, and Uganda benefiting in terms of enhancing their capacity for gold processing and exportation, and some of which comes through trade system and others through other means. It tells you that a lot there is in that part of the world. So to cut the long story short, this M23 have had very intensive pressure on DRC. And you remember when they captured Goma, this when it signaled people to say, hey, there is a big problem here. And after that, it has intensified diplomatic pressures on Rwanda to stop. But Rwanda definitely is very determined to push through because they've been blamed very, very seriously, and with some threats from powers like France, the US, to take action on Rwanda. And yet, of course, Rwanda can neither deny nor accept that they are supporting M23. Leading to the two summits. The first summit of Nairobi was interested in making sure that there are talks directly between Tshisekedi and M23. On the other hand, whereas the SADC also had a similar one, but they were insisting on supporting the Angola roadmap, which was also about a negotiated settlement. But then South Africa, being a major player in SADC, is insisting on using military means. And these military means, we have come to be informed that it is because there are a lot of South African mining companies, and these people are supposed to come and give them security, but at the same time to make sure that this other group does not take over the geographical area, because then they will eject the South African mining groups from benefiting. So the whole thing boils down to mineral resources competition. There are a lot of American and European corporations that are actually involved in the exploitation of the minerals. European Union officially entered into an arrangement with Rwanda to make sure that they also benefit from these minerals that come through Rwanda, and that may explain why they are not that hesitant to come in very strongly, because whereas they're speaking on the lips here, they know what they're doing, and they're sympathetic to M23's cause, and using that, of course, to ensure that they continue exploiting. Now, on the ground, there seems to be a rift between SADC and the ESA, and I just hope that this current summit is going to narrow down those differences. Whereas ESC wants to address the root causes and resolve the problem through peaceful means, SADC wants to use military means, oppose anything that threatens Kinshasa, because Kinshasa has given them opportunities of mining, among others. So there is that competition. Now, you recall that even until recently, France had organized actually a meeting in France, and they were doing that with Qatar. And when they did so, Tshisekedi snapped the meeting in Paris. It's supposed to take place on 9th, 2 days to go. But Tshisekedi has refused to attend the meeting in France, so it will not happen. And Kagame also had been invited to Rwanda in December, if you may recall. He also snapped that meeting because he felt that they are not giving serious attention to the issues on the ground. The engagement was taking a route that Kagame was not comfortable with. So for the first time, they were supposed to meet. I just hope Tshisekedi is in Dar es Salaam, because by late evening yesterday, he had not actually arrived. So the issue is there has to be pressure to Kinshasa to have direct talks with M23. Even if they think Rwanda or Uganda are supporting M23, but the actual thing is M23. Look at the grievances of the communities around M23 and address them, because failure of doing that, it will remain a source of destabilization. My fear is that if SADC people continue using military means and hoping to achieve what they want, the EAC bloc is very likely to also find a way of supporting the M23. Because EAC, when they were sent packing last year, they were very embarrassed and they're not very happy that you are going to bring another bloc to their doorsteps and that you are useless and pack and leave. So the EAC people have some kind of axe to grind with the SADC. So I just hope that this summit will unify its approach and agree to a process that will not only address the question of the current challenges, but the root causes. But otherwise, the way I see the thing going, sorry, I'm finishing. Now that they have appointed political leadership, they are creating an alliance which is going to become bigger and bigger. And yet, there are a lot of fault lines within the government secretary. This could actually cause much more problems to the government. It even may lead to its fall if it is not attended to. And I am not sure whether M23, having made this kind of gains, defeating an allied group of forces, including mercenaries, which was so embarrassing. They have demonstrated very serious resilience, high-level strategic and tactical maneuvers that have really outmaneuvered these allied groups. And that means they have now the confidence and the morale to push even further and further. So that's what I can say if it is not resolved, the likely consequences. Thank you very much, Lynn. Back to you.
Right. Thank you, Honorable Simon. Actually, you have given us a proper breakdown of what's going on, how it started, where we are, and a possible ending of this whole thing. But now, Francis, if I come to you, we are seeing that SADC and the East African community have come together, but we know that there are clashes therein. We also understand that there are also personal issues therein still within those entities. But question here would be, do you think we will see a solution by these two, SADC and ESC, very soon over DRC?
Thank you. I don't see a solution very soon. Why? You know, what started as a friction or a tribal friction, now it is growing over time. And now we should go back and ask, where did the name M23 originate? You remember that this M23 adopted the name after the Congo government failed to honor an agreement that was agreed on March 23rd. So, with that in mind, and remember when they all agreed and they were integrated into the army partially, and then they were planning to go and now fully do the integration after disarming them and so on, where they surrendered willingly, then they pound on them and even killing some of them. And then again, they went back and regrouped. So having that fear, they lost trust in the government itself. When they are committed that they can agree to peace, but they have doubt of what the government can do. And as Simon has said, now that they have gained momentum, that they can defeat mercenaries, they capture them and tell them, can you even go? They defeat a joint force. They are more determined to overthrow even the government of Tshisekedi. I, for one, I must be sincere, because I have seen how a tribe will descend down on another one to exterminate them. I think so far the areas where the M23 have been pacifying, you find that in their ideology, they are not so tribal. They don't cause havoc to other communities. They were in the first place peacefully. I would say that if SADC insists and they don't come up with a peaceful resolution, these people for the government. That is what bring a solution. I still believe that if the M23 takes over power and then they are on the table, and for them, as if when you talk to them, are ready and willing to the rest of the country. Where the country is not, given that it was training and supporting the militias against a trade. And you see always when Kisekedi is saying that these people should go back. Going back where? Okay, if they are going back, I have no problem. Then they should go back with their land. It would mean that the eastern part of Congo then should go back to the pre-colonial boundaries of the Rwanda kingdom. So I think that is something that we have to, maybe Sekedi needs to know that these people did not migrate to Congo. Rather, they were part and parcel. That is their land where they were. And he should educate himself about the history. Because this question, you remember, even Nelson Mandela, different people have been commenting about it and so on. Lynn, it would be right now if we say the Luo who are in Uganda, then they should go to Kenya. And yet when the boundaries were drawn, it divided. You remember Agra Wari, the brother being in Kenya, and like the family was divided in two. The family land divided into two, one part in Uganda, one part in Kenya. So it is the same situation here. And so if Kisekedi does not realize that and tap into the potential of the Banyamulenge, this will remain, it is, and you have seen how it is attracting to become more of a regional war. But when again the Western world comes in, it makes it worse. It makes it worse. And that's where I was thinking, for me, if I had the powers, the Western world should first step off this conflict, and then Africa, like as we have said, should always find our own solutions to our African problems. After sorting out ourselves or sorting out the whole problem and settling it, then we'll move forward. But without that, Congo is not going to be peaceful. Of course, Simon hinted, the whole war is about the expanse of minerals that do exist in that area. But again, like as Simon has said, Simon should be knowing this better than me. I come from the border with the DRC. Number one, we have suffered due to rebels that used to come from Congo attacking Uganda. So I also support that if the rebels are in Congo, if there is an agreement with Uganda, we should go and dismantle the ADF rebel groups and so on. And also because we always trade with Congo, I have never seen a problem with us constructing or a joint construction of roads for accessibility of trade, because I know how much money we earn from just trading as neighbors trading with Congo. So a peaceful resolution would be better. But again, Kisekedi should not forget how Mobutu's government was overrun, again with the force entering from Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo. So he should be conscious of that, and the better he comes to negotiate than listening.
All right. Thank you, Francis, for that. Talking of external influence and the Western world and solving our own problems, the president of Tanzania was calling on her counterparts to find solutions to solving our own problems as Africa, and that would include, of course, the issue in DRC. But now, if I could come to you, Miriam, we are seeing that. The UN, first of all, has said that this could escalate and become a regional problem or a regional conflict. But we also see that Rwanda is continuously denying responsibility and is also blaming Congo for the other problem. So they're blaming each other, and with the world is looking at them. So if I could ask you, Miriam, with all this at hand, first of all, Sekedi is not in the meeting. He joined via video. President Kagame is there live in that meeting. The tensions between these two countries. First of all, Kagame is blaming Tshisekedi or the Congo of supporting FDR. Congo is blaming Rwanda of backing the M23. And so there's a lot that is happening that has not been reached, because I would expect as these leaders come together to iron out these issues. But it seems it is a bigger problem that might never be solved. I don't know what you think, Miriam.
Yeah, you're right. It's a big problem, and it's not a new problem. This is the oldest conflict in Africa, and of recent, okay, the conflict comes on and goes out. When we are talking about immigrants, when you come to USA, for instance, the oldest African immigrants are from Congo and Sudan, South Sudan, because these countries have had the longest conflicts since Africa got independence. And that goes to what Francis hit on. The way Africa was reorganized at the Berlin Conference, the way the colonialists left like a mess, which we're still dealing with, and we have not yet sorted out. That mess of inter-border conflicts and the tribes and the failure of the independent states to really rebuild the nation, from the fragments that we inherited at independence. I think that the solution would be a united Africa. We keep talking about it; it becomes like a cliche, but we need a local solution. When you talk about UN, peacekeeping forces were there and they couldn't even have any effect. But if we take the Somalia example of AMZOM and how it has been able to, to some extent, a real good extent, resolve the Al-Shabaab conflict and pacified Somalia, I think that combined effort with joint forces is still the best way forward on Congo, but we still also need to go back on board and look at DRC as a country. Does it need to federate? Because it's like a huge mass land with so many resources, and not any post-independent leadership or government has ever managed to pacify Congo. We can blame the neighbors, but even the neighbors, when Congo, like Francis said, when Congo sneezes, it's like when Congo coughs, everyone sneezes. That we have a spillover of refugees in Uganda. Rwanda is scared about its border. Then we also have a fragile border on the other side of Sudan. So you can't just let them go, and you can't blame the neighboring countries trying to interfere in that conflict, because it affects them directly. And when this regional there is instability even in EAC. So if you don't have peace at home, you can't even export it abroad. So you even wonder, will EAC really is it like in the right shape? Push for peace in Congo today? Is SADC the right people to come in? And of course, they are stepping in because there is a watchman. They are also equally affected. But I think the right force to really sort that out would be an a united joint effort of African Union. But I don't know if they have the capacity. But going forward, I think the bigger question would be how to resolve the overall Congo problem, whether they make it a regional government and make them some semi-independent provinces, so that they are locally organized, because no government has ever managed to really exert their influence across the vast border of Congo. And then also there is that bigger issue of resources. they say that if Congo was pacified, Congo alone would be able to develop the rest of Africa on its own based on the resources they have in the country. And we also know that the Western world or the developed world, be it China, be it Qatar or USA or whatever, they also rushed Congo for minerals, and even individual traders, private companies and all. And that's why there are incidences of mercenaries, because if a company is benefiting from diamonds, they come with a private army to protect that zone, since the government is so weak in those areas, and they exploit as much as they can. So the whole issue of for me, I would think that even these small, whether it's a new government in DRC, even if they removed Sekeda and put in someone from MR 23, or whatever they do, I think that conflict is not about to end until they resolve the bigger governance question, the post-independent Congo. What type of account is supposed to be? I think it can benefit a lot more by being a confederation and have these regional governments, so they have control, even if they all report to the center. But there is a need for a presence of a government in these out border zones like the Eastern Congo and all that, in order for them to protect their borders effectively.
Right. Thank you, Miriam. Brian, I come to you. Still on the same issue. We know that for sure for years, Congo, the Eastern Congo, has really been a hub for all sorts of activity and conflict and unresolved at that, and it continues to happen. Now we have where Rwanda is accusing Congo, and Congo is definitely accusing Rwanda of supporting M23. In fact, the allegations that Rwanda is backed by the European, I don't know how deep that is, by Europe in this conflict. So when we see that the EAC is coming together and SADC, of course, South Africa and these other countries have interest, they're backing DRC in a way. We see it becoming a bigger problem, because all of them have different interests in this in the Congo. And of course they say when you're pregnant, everyone's eyes are on you, and so they can easily fight for the baby if the father is not really in control. So what do you say?
Thank you, Lynn, for having me. I think the question of Congo has been very extensively discussed by my fellow panelists. That's the advantage of going last. All the good points have been made. But I think obviously the problems of Congo are, as Simon articulated, as Miriam and as Francis articulated, are very diverse and very complex. And I think right from the get-go, right from independence, with the assassination of Patrice Lumumba by the Belgians, and then the installation of Mobutu, and then how, because Congo was not really ruled like a colony in the way some other countries were. It was ruled like the personal property of King Leopold. So at independence, so he never really educated the masses or gave them or prepared them for independence. I think there's a reporters. I think at independence they had about like 6 university graduates, which was for a country that big to begin with, was still very low. I think obviously other countries, Uganda and the rest, were much more prepared, at least in terms of having an educated civil service that could try to do that. So I think Congo is unfortunate in that it was ill prepared for independence. It was never governed and given the institutions the way other countries were. So you multiply all that with the challenges that came to all other countries in terms of different ethnic groups and the drawing of the borders. I think its problems are magnified. Having said that, we cannot always keep talking and crying history and this happened and this happened. Every country, every society had something that happened. America was colonized by the British. The Jews were almost exterminated in the Holocaust. The Chinese were colonized by Japanese. So, as a people, as Africa, we need to stop lamenting. This is our home. We have no other home. We may go abroad and work and get educated, but this, even when we die, our bodies will be shipped back here on this continent. So I think we need to realize that we have an obligation to each other to live peacefully with each other, with our beautiful and unique diversity as a people. And I think it's incumbent upon us. Yeah, it's not just the leaders. The leaders who are in power today at one point will be gone. The problems will still be there. So how do we as citizens relate with each other? Because it's among us citizens that the next leaders will come. So I think how we view these issues, how we discuss them, how we educate each other is of paramount importance. Thank you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Indeed, that echoes with the message from President Samia Suluhu Hassan of Tanzania, coming up with solutions for African problems, that are African solutions for African problems. Right now, I want us to use the remaining few minutes to talk about the recent very interesting court ruling of the Supreme Court that ruled that trying civilians in military courts is unconstitutional. I want to say that it was one of those sweeping moments in the country where it was really, really a major step in protecting the right to a fair trial. But the government, of course, criticized the move. We'll get to know how this affects us, of course. And not so long ago, I think about, yes, yeah, not so long ago, the Attorney General told Parliament that government had started implementing the recent Supreme Court order on trying civilians in the General Court Martial. I want to start with you, Miriam, and ask, is this something long overdue? Is it an exciting move in the right direction? Will we see its implementation? And the other would be, what effects does it have now? Because we have seen there were people who were already who were tried in the court martial and of course sentenced to different years in prison and ABCD. How then does this affect them or affect the court itself going forward?
I think the court martial ruling, the Supreme Court ruling on the court martial was long overdue. And first of all, I want to congratulate and thank everybody, especially the civil society, the law society, everybody who exerted pressure, the parliament inclusive, exerted pressure on the Supreme Court to deliver that ruling, because they have sat on it for the longest time without any reason whatsoever. And we remember also there was a stay. And in any case, there shouldn't have even been an appeal when the Constitutional Court ruled that the court martial was an illegal entity. So yeah, it's a sigh of relief, but let's not forget that justice delayed is really justice denied, and so many people have suffered in the course of time. As these honorable judges delayed their ruling, so many people have been incarcerated for no reason whatsoever, especially the opposition leaders, since we all know that the court martial was used as a weapon of the regime, NRM regime, to torture and control the opposition forces. On the case of justice, I was intrigued. I am not a lawyer, so I don't know how this works, because they kind of ruled. Of course, they said that the court martial is not a good, it's not even a court as far as standards are concerned, to even sentence anybody or be a court of judicature, given its illegal composition and even lack of lawyers and all that. People who qualify to be judicial officers. So I wonder, people who were sentenced, like you said, because they said the law doesn't work retrospectively. I don't know if anybody here among my fellow panelists has an idea. Those people who were unjustly sentenced by this kangaroo court, what is their fate? Of course, I know they can appeal, but I don't know if this ruling is going to apply to them. If for me, I would think that those people who suffered an injustice through this court martial should all be given a reprieve and a chance to be tried again in normal courts, in normal civilian courts, which are composed with standard judicial officers, so that they can also have justice as they deserve. So I don't know how that law is going to apply, but give and take, I think this was good, but it was long overdue. And let's not forget that the people have really screamed so loud and banged the tables, as Semakade called it, in order to achieve this. So it also kept me wondering, do we need, if we push more, can we see more changes, more positive changes coming into Uganda as far as justice and human rights are concerned?
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay. I want to ask Honorable Simon Mulongo on the future and the effects of this decision, because I'm seeing that the Attorney General did say that all inmates under trial in the court martial are now in the jurisdiction of the courts of judicature. How then do we move forward? Is it going to be disbanded? Is it going to be, are there going to be reforms or, amendments, the UPDF Act that, of course, put in place this court and all these things? Honorable Simon.
Thank you very much, Lynn. The ruling by, the unanimous ruling by the Supreme Court was very interesting because they not only ordered that trying of civilians in military courts should stop, but also offered a lot of guidelines as to how reforms can be done if these courts can qualify to be part of the courts of adjudication in the country. Because as they stand now, they neither have the competencies nor the appellate structure that can ensure justice in that regard. So, of course, officially the government has accepted that, and the Attorney General has been able to report on that, and they're working on extraction of orders to be for implementation, because ruling alone does not automatically create implementation. There have to be some implementation orders that are supposed to be extracted, and the various agencies of government will take responsibility and begin acting on the ruling. Now, I'm not sure whether that has been done yet, but it's supposed to be done because the Attorney General, Honorable Kiwanuka, did state that all pending criminal trials in the court martial should cease immediately, and that the military courts are collaborating with the prison authorities to transfer cases involving civilians to appropriate civilian courts. This means that there must be a transitional arrangement for those who are formerly in military courts and who are in custody because of the orders of military courts to be moved to the civilian courts. That does not mean that military courts will cease. The military courts have to remain because they are established for a purpose. It is only until recently when the amendment of 2015, what was it, I don't remember, whatever the amendment, that brought in the issue of civilians who conduct themselves in a manner that resembles that of the military. Issues of firearms, issues of cohabiting and working with or aiding military to occasion threats to national security and so on. So I think we now have to keep our eyes open to see what orders will have been extracted and being implemented by the various agencies. But I also want to add my voice to what my sister Miriam and I don't know who else said, that there have been some mixed reactions from some members of the executive. Whereas President Museveni was quoted to have said that he had been advising these people about the issue of civilian being tried in military courts, and they were not very clear or arguing against it. Now the matter has been settled. But on the other hand, there are sources quoting him that he was reserved about that decision. And then the CDF also has been quoted to have also saying publicly that he criticized the ruling, suggesting that it could pose a serious threat to national security and undermine the effective command of the army, of the UPDF. So all this, it means there are some reservations which actually have to keep this conversation going. It cannot just end at this. But just allow me to say, as a student of War College, to tell you that the concept of military courts is really comes very far into the past, where the military courts not only exist for ensuring efficiency and security arrangements within itself, but also involving trying of civilians. And many conventions have come up and so on that denounce the practice of trying civilians in military courts. For example, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 14, outlines the right to a fair and public hearings before a competent, independent, and impartial tribunal. So, in other words, the issue of civilians may not receive fair trial in the military courts. However, other than in Uganda, Egypt actually still has civilians tried in military courts. And Turkey, the same thing, since 2016, when they had the coup attempt. They carried out widespread prosecutions of civilians in military courts. But whether we do like it or not, there are circumstances where military courts can actually try civilians. For example, during war, this becomes an exceptional situation where some people argue that the military courts can be justified to try civilians. Then, of course, in occupied territories, for example, in the M23 territory, if they don't have judicial systems in a place where civilians are in charge of the legal systems, you may find civilians being tried because they may not have been established some, and so on. So our studies look at all this, but for the case of Uganda specifically, the issue has been nailed down. One is about competency, the other one is fairness, the other one is lack of appeal system, and of course the major one being the fact that the military court martials in this country are not established as part of the courts of judicature. In other words, if you can appeal beyond the court, the military courts to say Court of Appeal, Supreme Court, and so on, it doesn't exist. Now all those undermine principles and practice of judicial processes as we know them in civilized communities. So let's see. I think let's just see what happens next, because now it is still bordering on yes and no. On the other hand, the legal fraternity have agreed, yes, we should move on and reform should be done in these other courts, and there are those reservations. So we need to live to see that. Back to you.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you. Indeed, we are yet to see how the separation of powers plays here. I intentionally end with you, Francis, as we come to the conclusion of this conversation, because you are part of an opposition group, and we see that according to human rights groups, Ugandan military courts have tried hundreds of civilians, including opposition politicians and government critics. But we see also, according According to VOA News, President Museveni has defended the military court, saying its trials reinforce civilian judicial system to defend the lives of people against armed criminals. He goes on to say that military courts are beneficial to the country's security and ordered the Attorney General to propose constitutional amendments to prevent judges from interfering with their work. Francis, I understand this was good news, but we are yet to see it come into effect. So do not be so excited. Francis?
Thank you, Lynn. Indeed, for me, I'm not excited about it because when I saw the letter from the president and then the comments of the CDF, I said, yes, that's what I expected from, because as Miriam said, the court martial, which I believe is supposed to be a disciplinary wing of the people in uniform, had turned to be weaponized against people who are not in support of the government or who provide alternative views or dissenting views about what government is doing and so on. Because if it was just the court martial system, I believe that the NUP supporters, their crime is less than the crime of Jamil Mukulu, for example, who was a leader of the ADF, did a lot of massacres, especially in Western Uganda and other areas, and even they could plan a series of other attacks in Kampala. Why is it that he's tried in a civil court as opposed to these mayor supporters, or as opposed to Besigye? So I see there that there is a big problem. Then we can name examples. If you remember the bombing, like during the World Cup and so on, and so many others, they go to the civil court. So I see this as the court martial as an extension of the political court of court of the NRM, of the ruling party. And I've also seen that if you see what the president wrote, it is as if he is the chief judge. And therefore, this goes contrary to the preamble of our constitution. And if I may read in verbatim, like I think paragraph 3, committed to building a better future by establishing a socio-economic and political order through a popular and durable national constitution based on the principles of unity, peace, equality, democracy, freedom, social justice, and progress. So you see that most of these, the court martial and then Museveni, the president, taking issues into his hands, then he's the one to direct them on what to do, not stand a test of what the framers of the constitution were intending to stop happening. Then if you look at the ruling on the 31st of January was helping us, a clear separation of powers of the arms of government, the legislature, the executive, and then the judiciary. But then we find a problem that it has always been the problem of the president to always intervene in all these. Like he had swallowed everything, and he's the one at the mantle, and that's why I'm still skeptical whether even when Simon says the attorney is working. I do agree that is a process is working. Whether this process will take a short time or it is going to take years, because the NRM using a delay technique, and then it may drag on that they are doing a process, and people who are detained illegally, like and the NUP supporters and others that we don't know who are even being paraded in court martial will get their freedom, because Article almost 28 says the right to a fair hearing, which we have not been seeing people getting, those who are in a court martial. You remember the key the lawyer for Kwesiga. I have never seen it in the world. Seconds and sentenced, period. So I still believe that we still have a long way to go, and not until we iron out these dictatorial tendencies. And I know for a fact what they are going to do. They are going to rush and amend the constitution, because the NRM is good at doing that. That every other time there is something that does work in their favor, is providing justice, they rush, amend the constitution to suit their interests at that particular time. And I'm just praying that of time when that will catch up with them, because that has always been a tendency. And I suspect they may go hurriedly, suggest how to amend the constitution, and amend the act about UPDF, and then have it constituted to a report, and then you find that even people who are incarcerated or appear before that court will not get their freedom despite this ruling. But we pray that if indeed the way how the NRM sometimes arranges itself, that it is patriotic, there is freedom and so on, that they are not going to, they are going to respect the Constitution of the Republic of Uganda. That is number one. Then number two, they are going to respect the arm of the judicial system to ensure that, because they are on test, not only locally but internationally, they are on a test. Because they have abrogated all other forms of human rights and so on. But now here we see, is it something that they will follow and abide by? But according to how I see, I think it's not, because now when issues are being this is an issue that is pertaining us, not, it is not a military. So I find it a little bit lacking and off, because to me, much as there is a process, number one, they never do their due intelligence that even right now, message is not going to run out the new supporters, get them out of prison, now prefer charges against them and take them and arrest them and then competent court, than appearing before, I don't know whether it is a committee, I don't know what it is called, I don't know how to address it. So I think that is the best thing to do, but I don't agree with the slow pace at which they are implementing the ruling of the Supreme Court, in as far as the martial court is concerned. Yes, I was talking about that there are special cases where the court martial can work. Yes, we are not in an emergency situation. We are not Eastern DRC Congo, or they can go and begin operating fully in the Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, or we don't have that current to continue or operating on civilians in Uganda. If it is disciplining their army, I agree for sure. Their committee discipline their army. But when it comes to the civilians, let's for one respect our constitution, and then we see how we move forward building after. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Francis. I don't know if was Hon.Simon or Miriam have anything to add before we can conclude.
Nothing much to add, Lynn, except that the tone of the president was not the one which is very assuring as far as the rule of law is concerned. Will he respect the court martial ruling? And secondly is, why is the Attorney General taking forever to implement and release the incarcerated? Like Kizza Besigye and others who are we already know they are there illegally and they are not supposed to be in that predicament. So you can see that there is dilly-dallying on their side, and it doesn't go well. It doesn't. It's not a positive sign, and it wouldn't be the first time for the president to really disobey the court ruling or just go against the court ruling in case he tries something funny.
Mm-hmm. Right. Honorable Simon.
Yes, my brother, Mr. Kamuhanda, I was just giving you additional information about the principles and underlying and practice underlying civilians in military courts. I know very well. I said I gave you circumstances where they can. So it is not whether I like the civilians in court martial or I don't like. I was just telling you additional information.
Right.
Also, the guidance from the Supreme Court is to the effect that yes, because for them they are not opposed to civilians being tried in courts of military. They are only saying that the courts, the way the law is crafted now, contradicts with the provisions of the Constitution. That means even government can change the Constitution and align the second laws with the Constitution, and it will be home and dry. So, but I see your point. Your point is that you wouldn't want. But for me, I'm saying neither I want or I don't want. I'm just talking in principle about the current situation of military courts trying civilians, and elsewhere where civilians are tried in military courts in some countries. So the issue of the delay, I just hope that, as I said, let's keep the conversation going because we don't know what's happening behind some doors. The engagement's going on, and so on. We'll see what really comes out. So next time when we meet, hopefully it will still be on the agenda because most likely there will be continued developments that are necessary for us to exchange ideas on.
Right. All right. I want to thank you, Honorable Simon. I want to thank you, Brian, who was left a few minutes earlier. I want to thank you, Miriam and Francis, for making time once again for the Uganda Diaspora Show. And we hope to catch you some other time. I wish you the very best. Leave your question or comments in our comment sections around also so we can see how best we can address issues Uganda diaspora. Thank you very much.